Okay, I'm going to do a comparison of two games today. I've got two games are Blueprints and Cubist. And I think a lot of people, when they're trying to decide which one to buy of these two, are kind of looking for comparisons and stuff. So I'm going to do a little bit of a comparison of the two games. I will say right up front that I like both games. But I will tell you which one I like more here as we go along with these comparisons. Both games are about building structures with dice. In Blueprints, you're building a building with dice. In Cubist, you are building an installation or sculpture with dice. And it might be a little hard to see, but the separation between the two games is right here. Over on his side is Cubist, over on this side is Blueprint, and I just kind of had to squeeze them together, get them on the camera frame here. But I think Rado has done a run through of both games, and in his review he kind of waffled between which one he liked better, and just kind of left it at that, having a hard time to decide. But his run-throughs are excellent, and if you want to learn how to play the games, that's where you should go to learn how to play the games. And I'm not really going to talk too much about how to play. So let's just jump right into it. I'll start with Blueprints. The way Blueprints works is you are building dice. Not building dice, building structures with the dice. And the rules for building in Blueprints are different than for building in Cubist. In Blueprints, you get, each person gets one of these cards, and the cards are hidden information. You don't show what you are building, I think. So that right there is one difference between Cubist. When you play Cubist, your sculptures are out on this board and everybody can see, whereas in Blueprints you're building and it's hidden information. Now the rules for placing are different. In Cubist, you can place on the first row, you can place cubes next to each other, and it doesn't matter. There's nothing on the dice that prevents you from placing them together like this. However, when you place a cube on top of another, it has to be equal or higher in number. So I could place this on top of this 5 here like that, and build that. In Cubist, when you are placing dice to build, and what you're building is you have a choice and it's out on the board. Everybody is attempting to build these. You can kind of choose which one you're going for, and you can actually have a couple going. You can actually have 2 sculptures going on at once. You have 2 spaces for it. But the person who finishes first and claims it is the one who gets it. So you could be going for one, but someone else could get it before you, whereas in Blueprints, you have your private building. You only have one of them, but you're the only one who's going to be building that building. So in Cubist, you're actually going to be competing for to finish different installations first. But anyways, back to the placement. When you are placing dice in Cubist, you have your kind of reserve here. You start with 2 dice, and you roll them, and the way that they're placed on the board is that you can place them out onto one of your sculptures like this, and to place them next to each other, they have to be either number 1 higher or 1 lower. If you want to stack them, they must be the same number. So a 2 could go on top of this, and a 1 could go here. And if I was going for this, for example, I would need... Now, a 6 cannot connect to the 1. So the only thing that I can connect to here would be a 2. And then I will need a 2 to stack on top of it to finish that sculpture and claim this first. Now, so the rules for placement of your dice are a lot stricter in Cubist than in Blueprints. And I sort of actually like it's a little bit more of a puzzle to put together your sculpture in Blueprints, especially these complicated ones, because you can run into some problems where if you don't get the dice You know, like for example, this, it's hard to see it, but this dice here that's surrounded by these 4 dice is pretty critical because everything that goes around it is dependent upon that middle die. So you can get into these situations where it is more difficult to place the dice on these sculptures, where in this, the flexibility is there. In this game, Cubist, you get 2 dice to work with every turn, whereas in Blueprints, you only pick 1, but you're picking 1 that you want from a larger pool. And the pool in the 2-player game is 8. When you pick a die, you will also pick 1 die to get rid of, and then 2 more dice will come out. So what's available is constantly in circulation in this game. Whereas in Cubist, you're rolling and whatever you get for your die roll. Now, one of the things in Blueprints, when you grab your die, you must place it. However, in Cubist, you get a couple dice, you can store 2 of them in your storeroom so that they can be used at a later time. So you don't have to use your dice in Cubist. So I could store 2 dice when my next turn comes around. Now I've actually got 4 dice to work with. And that helps because, for example, if I had, let's say I had a more complicated structure here I was building onto this, the 4 can't connect onto this 2. Okay? But my next turn I will happen to roll a 3, so now I've opened it up. Now I can connect onto this 2 here with the 3, because I have to be 1 higher or 1 lower. Dropping the dice. And now I can connect onto the 3 with a 4. Now obviously this doesn't match any of the plans, I'm just kind of showing you how the dice build out. Ah! Keep knocking them over. Anyways, so it is interesting, I think, that you can save dice, whereas in Blueprints, you're at the mercy of what's available, and when there's a lot of turns going on, the dice are going to be cycling a lot. So when you're when you're waiting for your turn to come around, you're not really sure what's going to be available and what's not. And also, when you are planning your strategy, let's say like the scoring works, there's different ways to score points. There's a black dice, green dice, clear dice, and orange dice. And a lot of times you're kind of planning, you're kind of going for certain amounts, because if you're going like for the green dice, you're going to want to have a lot of green dice, right? So, because only one of them is only worth 2 points. So if you're going for green dice, you're going to want a lot of them. So let's say I pick a green die, okay? And then I don't know my next turn, you know, there might not be any green die. There's no guarantees as to what's going to be out and available for me. And that's sort of one of the, I think one of the annoyances to me of Blueprints, even though I like the game, is that a lot of people are saying that this game, Blueprints, is a lot more long-term strategic planning. And to me, I don't really find that to be true because of the variability in what's available. You know, I might pick to go for green dice, and there's no guarantees that I'm going to be able to get very many green dice at all because of the way the things are circulating out on a board. So that's one of the things. But with Cubist, there are a couple of things that mitigate that. One, you get your storehouse. So if you get a die that cannot be used right away, it might become useful later on, and you can put it up in your storehouse. The other thing that you can do is there are these cards, these artist cards. I do like the artist cards quite a bit. And when I first started the game, you know, you look at the card, okay, well this card gives you -2 in a die. Big deal. I mean, really, who cares? It doesn't seem like that great. This one, you put 2 dice on it, and you'll be able to use your... The dice must match. It must be doubles. But you'll be able to... I think this one's get a die with a 6 on it. It's either get a die or change a die to a 6. I have to double check the rules on that one. This one you can change the value of a die to +1. This one's +2. So yeah, I mean, they don't seem that great. However, these cards are actually very integral to playing the game well. Because, for example, I might have my pair of 4s here, and I can put them out here All right, and they stay out there on a card. Now, someone can actually knock my dice off by playing a pair that's higher. Like someone could pay a pair of sixes and knock my dice off, which would be a bummer. But my dice are out here, and because sometimes you might not have that much of a use for your dice. So on a later turn, oh, let's see, maybe I need a 6. I got my 6 now by using this card. So the cards give you a lot of options, especially what happens is, you know, when you get some dice in storage, you get some dice out on these cards, you can get some really big turns with a lot of combos in them. So I do like that about Cubist. Okay, so the cards over here, the Yars cards, do help mitigate some of the roll of the dice. The storage area helps kind of mitigate some of the problems when you can't do much with your turn, because you know you're not really wasting by putting your dice into storage, because they're going to be available for you at some point. And you know, you could have a turn where you could place 4 dice out at once instead of 2. So there's really not a disadvantage to saving your dice. Whereas, you know, Cubist, you've got to use 1. And there are only 6 turns, so every turn in Blueprints means something. So if you get in a really bad spot on one turn, that could really foil you for the entire round. Now, Blueprints has these cards, which are some bonuses that you can get if you can complete these, like the tallest building. That is a minimum of, I think, 5 tall. You can get 2 points. This is if you use all this, I think, all the same color dice. This is if you have 4 dice that have a matching number on them, and this is if you get a straight of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So these cards are pretty cool. I do like these. However, my little bit of gripe with this is only worth 2 points to get it. You know, these cards are only worth 2 points. The majority of your points are going to be through your placement of your cubes. So quite honestly, these are not really worth going. They're almost like incidental, you know. They're great if you can get it, but you're not going to, like, you know, if you get one of these clear dice, one of these is worth, like, whatever the face of the die is. If one of these comes up as a 6, that's 6 points. Are you really going to get that one last you know, that one last other die? You know, maybe there's another die that you're going for and it's got a number on it. Are you really going to go for that for 2 points, or are you going to take, like, the 6 points? I don't know, but you know, 2 points isn't really worth that much to really go out of your way to get these cards. I think that they should be worth a little bit more to make them actually sort of viable to go for. Right now, the way that they are is that they're kind of like icing on the cake. If you get them, great. If you don't, well, the majority of your points are, you're going to be positioning yourself for these points, not for those points. All right, but okay. So and you can get a lot of points in a turn in Blueprints, which is why getting the points on your card is much better than getting these meager points. In Cubist, the spread on the cards is much tighter. You go to all the extent to build your sculpture, but you're only going to get the point value on the card. So some cards are worth a lot more. The more complicated the sculpture, usually the more points. However, there's also something else going on with these cards, and that is at the bottom of a card is a red die. So when you complete a sculpture, you can claim it, and then what you do is you can take one of your dice from your pool here and you place it on the card, and I can place, and what it says is the 2 options here. I got 1, I can make this a 1 or a 5. Now, once you place it on your card, you can actually build on this museum sculpture in the middle, and every die you place on here is worth 2 points, so it's pretty significant. So a lot of times in the game you might go for a sculpture just to get the die here to build on the museum. whereas you might not care too much about the sculpture. So once I get the die on here, I can place it immediately in the museum if I want, and this is nice because it's a 5 there and I would want to place it on top. So you can see that this 5 here on this card is pretty valuable. This has a 3, a 6, which the 3 and 6 is actually going to be, the 6 would be valuable because it can connect to the 5, and the 5 would be valuable to go on top. So not only is this card worth 3 points, but right now as it stands, both of those die can go right into the museum and actually be worth 2 points each. So that card's actually quite appealing right now. So you've kind of got that going on. Now, sometimes you get a card where like the numbers are completely unworkable for what's in the museum because of the layout and what's required for the numbers. You can use dice on these cards to help you on your sculpture down here. So you can transfer it onto your sculptures and use it that way and help you complete a sculpture, which will get you some points later on in the game. So I think that's an interesting layer on this game. So there is definitely a lot of player interaction in Cubist, in the sense that you are going for the same sculptures and you can see what other people are doing on the board, so you can definitely usually see what somebody is going for example, and there's 3 cards out. If someone starts stacking dice, well, you know they're going for this card. These 2 are actually fairly similar. In fact, this pattern is inside of this pattern, so you could actually go for this one and maybe, and you'd have a tough decision at one point to decide whether, okay, I could build this shape, but then I could continue on and maybe go for this one, but if I don't claim this, someone else might. Type of thing going on. So someone can grab your sculpture before you finish. However, if someone does do that, though, there is something that you can do with your dice. So what you can do is, let's just say that I almost had this done. Someone grabbed this sculpture right here. What you can do, though, is you can disband your sculpture, and the dice that you're not going to use go back into your pool. That's a bummer. However, sets of doubles can go out on these cards. So even though someone beat you to the card, you can disband your sculpture and get some dice onto these artist cards to help you get a big turn later on, that you might be able to beat somebody else to the punch later on because you've got dice on the artist cards. So it's not a total loss if somebody beats you to it, so to speak. There are also some artist cards that allow you to transfer dice from one sculpture to another. So if you're building a shape and it's not working out, you could potentially transfer a die over to another sculpture and use it that way to help yourself. So to me, I don't know, just to me, it seems like to me that there's more going on in Cubist. There's a little bit more of a layer of strategy going on in Cubist. Whereas Blueprints, you're trying to work out your long-term strategy, but you're always struggling up against what might be available and what is available, and sometimes you just run into a situation where I can clearly see my plan is not going to work out, I've got to change. So there are, some decisions to make. I just find that there's a lot more to mitigate that in Cubist, whereas in Blueprints I think you are more at the mercy of what comes out, because some I mean, it seems to happen. It has happened a lot to my wife when we've been playing this, where she'll roll, pull out a clear die and she'll roll a 6. Thank you, I'll take that. And then I'll pull out a die and I'll pull out a clear one and I'll roll a 1 for her or something, on whatever dice, or I'll pull out something else and I'll pull out something completely useless for what she wants, and there's really nothing she can do about it, because there's such a changeover in the dice. You just don't know what's going to be there. There's no guarantees, so you can actually, it might look like all of a sudden in one round it might be like a lot of greens, and all of a sudden that could just disappear. They could all disappear. in a round in the game, and then it's like, wow, what looked like a promising strategy, all of a sudden, it's not anymore because the dice have disappeared. It might sound like I'm kind of beating up a little bit on Blueprints, but I still really like Blueprints. I think I like it a little bit more than my wife. I think my wife definitely prefers Cubist more. But I do like this game, and there is one big point in favor of Blueprints, is that Blueprints is short enough that it could be considered a filler game. 30 minutes, definitely you can finish this game in 30 minutes. The turns move fairly quickly. The rounds, it's only 3 rounds, and the rounds are quick. It's only 6 rounds, and then the next phase, and then there's only 3 like main phases of the game, and then the game is over. So Blueprints can fit into that filler category, whereas if you're going to sit down with Cubist, it's more of a commitment. I don't think you're going to get through this game in 30 minutes with more than 2 people. My wife and I can get through it fairly quickly, but it definitely takes us longer, quite a bit longer to get through Cubist than it does Blueprints. And I think that's kind of one of those things where, I think more people are going to be more willing to jump into Blueprints because it's a filler, and because you can pull it out. Whereas, like, yeah, if you got to commit to a full-size game, I think the audience for this one begins to diminish a little bit more, because I don't know if it's quite as appealing in that sense. Component-wise, both games, the components are fine. People have complained about the box for Cubist not needing to be this large. It isn't a huge box, but I kind of would prefer it to have been smaller too, because I'm beginning to run out of shelf space. This is small and portable, what you want from a filler game. The dice, obviously, I think people would probably prefer the dice in Cubist. They just, really, good quality dice. I mean, dice are not that expensive anyway, so there's no excuse to skimp on dice ever. But those are quite nice. And the ones in Blueprint are kind of these nice, hefty dice too. They're just not as fancy in terms of colors and stuff, but they're workable. So, component-wise, you're getting a few more components in Blueprints, and there's more dice because of the various different players, whereas everybody's drawing by the same pool in Blueprints. But I think you're getting the price point at the stores, though, is pretty significantly different. This Cubist is quite a bit more expensive than Blueprints. And I don't know if you're getting the value in the price difference out of Cubist, whereas I think this game is definitely, hey, it's like, I don't know, 20 bucks or something. I don't know what the MSRP on it, but you can get this for 20 bucks if you look around. This one here, you're going to pay more, and you're still going to pay more even if you can find it on sale at this point, unless it starts hitting the clearance bin. It's priced a lot higher, and I don't really see the difference in the components. Dice are really not that expensive. It's only got a couple pieces of cardboard, and it's got a few more cards and stuff, but not to justify the difference in price. But as I've said before, would you pay a little more for a game that you felt was better? And I would, personally. But there is a point where, if a game is really overpriced, I'm going to stay away from it. So I don't know if this is worth it at retail price or not. I don't know. This one definitely, I think, is priced well, and it's worth it. So that's the breakdown. I prefer Cubist to Blueprints, but I like both games. And in terms of which game I'm going to play more, I think because my wife likes this one more, we'll probably end up playing this more. But being that filler game, this one's might have a chance to be played more, just because, it's something that can be whipped out in more situations probably than Cubist can. So that's basically an overview of both games. I like them both, but I'm going to give the nod to Cubist in this situation, even if Blueprints was the predecessor. So you got to give a nod to the designer of the original, too, just for coming out with it first. And I don't know how much this game was influenced. I would assume it was, but one of the designers of this game is Alf Seifert, who also did The Road to Canterbury and Fantastica, and I have both of those games, and I like both of those games. My wife really likes Road to Canterbury. I really like Fantastica, but my wife does not like Fantastica. But Alf Seifert games, the games he's involved with, are always very cleverly designed. Though he hasn't quite hit that mainstream note, and I think had a real big selling breakout game. His games are always solid. You can count on them. This designer here, Torigny has done Northwest Passage, that game as well. But this one here, it's definitely still a gem. I like both games.